go for launch.
5.
Quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
4.
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
This whole thing is insane.
3.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
Where's the kaboom?
2.
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
1.
William Shatner!
I see you walking around town with the girl I love, and I'm like, you. I guess the change in my pocket wasn't enough. I'm like, you and her too. I said I was richer and I'd still be with her. Ha! Now ain't that some stuff? And although there's a pain in my chest, I still wish you the best with a you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Can't afford a Ferrari. But that don't mean I can't get you there. I guess he's an Xbox, and I'm more an Atari. But the way you play your game ain't fair. Oh, I pity the fool that falls in love with you. Well, I got some news for you. Yeah, go run and tell your little boyfriend. I see you driving around town with the girl I love, and I'm like, you. I guess the change in my pocket wasn't enough. I'm like, you and her too. If I said I was richer, I'd still be with you. Yeah, ain't that some stuff? And although there's a pain in my chest, I still wish you the best with the you.
Greetings, my fellow galactic travelers, and welcome back to Planet 8. This is your mission commander Larry speaking to you from our hidden base. Chief Engineer Bob is here by my side as always in the command center, and circling Planet 8 in our orbital spy satellite is Reconnaissance Officer Karen.
And on this episode of Planet 8, I am super excited, more so than usual. This is our Thankful For episode, and ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, Planet 8 is thankful for William Bartholomew Shatner. Okay, his middle name not Bartholomew, but still, we wanted to give it a little gravitas.
Tiberius or something, right? William Tiberius Shatner.
Walker and I went to a convention back in the heyday of Star Trek and sci-fi, the Sci-Fi Summit in Pasadena.
Oh yeah.
And for years they would list him as not William Shatner, not Bill Shatner, the man. And so ever after, he is the man.
Well, and then we had our Shatner the man T-shirts.
I wish I still had mine. I have my I grok Spock or still grokking Spock shirt, but
yeah, that was great. I had that printer and I could print up iron-on transfers.
Those were fun.
Yeah, those were some cool shirts we had, but yeah, they pretty much fell apart after a few washings. But
I can proudly say that I have never had a William Shatner T-shirt. There's been a few like Star Trek T-shirts over the years, but no one specific. Not a Spock shirt or a Kirk shirt or anything like that.
You see what I got on tonight? Why Captain Kirk is better than Picard? I love most of the captains, but I gotta say
most.
We won't name names.
I like most people.
I like most of the captains, but yeah, of course, Captain Kirk, the original captain.
Captain Kirk.
The original.
Well,
captain.
Not really though. It's Pike, right?
Well, if you're going to get all like
piloty
meta with me, but yeah, it's.
Oh, then it was Robert April, but well, it could be Jonathan Archer, but I digress.
There you go. Where does it end? Nobody knows.
Was it James T. Kirk, James R. Kirk?
But who was the first captain in all of our hearts?
Kirk.
I'll tell you who, James T. Kirk. That's who.
Right.
The man. The only.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just saying that he typified what it meant to be not only the starship captain, but a leader. And I think in a lot of ways, I know for a lot of guys, he represented like what it meant to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think for the rest of us who weren't necessarily a guy, he meant, like what it meant to be somebody who, was a leader, was strong, was courageous, compassionate, all those things that you looked for and respected and believed in.
Guys wanted to be him. Women wanted to be with him.
That was also James Bond, too.
That's right.
But they were very, very different.
There was a vulnerability to Captain Kirk as well that he only shared with his close friends, McCoy and Spock. And, man, I mean, we could go on and on just on Star Trek. But
we want the total chat, right?
Yeah, we should do that another episode. Just talk about Star Trek for like 5 episodes.
Well, I think it's just, the lead in for Shatner is always going to be Star Trek because that's what those of us, at least of a certain age, will always connect him to.
But he was in things before Star Trek. In fact, I'm going to talk about one too this episode, but let's who's wants to talk a little bit about the man, the myth, the legend?
Well, I mean, I think one of the most interesting things about Shatner, we see him as like Captain Kirk, the all-American hero, but he's actually Canadian. He was born March 22nd, 1931 in Montreal. He was Canadian. He's also Jewish, which maybe some people don't know.
We just lost half our audience.
Well, good. We don't want them around anyway. So
that's right.
I think it was interesting. I was listening to an interview with him, and somebody asked him if he ever faced any anti-Semitic, comments or problems. And he said that when he was in school, actually, he would get beat up fairly often because he was Jewish. And that shocked me. I didn't realize, that he had any issues with that as a kid. And that because he was getting in fights all the time, he got the nickname Tuffy. So, you
I
think
thought that referred to as toupee.
No, that was toupee. But yeah, you think about, well, how does that, affect somebody and their development and how they grow up? But he had to deal with that growing up. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, he dealt with that. His parents weren't particularly thrilled that he wanted to become an actor, but he did. And, when he was young, it was kind of interesting because reading about some of the early work he did, especially like from the stage, there were some critics who put him in the same class as people like, Robert Redford and Steve McQueen. But for whatever reason, he didn't have that same career path, and he wound up just doing a lot of less memorable stuff than they did. But, eventually did make his way into some interesting TV projects, which I know we're all aware of, such as the stuff he did for like Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and so forth. I don't know if you guys want to get into that now or move into it later.
Yeah, no, I mean, let me say, as far as like, Steve McQueen or those actors of that time, they're not on a thankful for episode of Planet 8. So Mr. Shatner right there.
Well, I mean, how many Star Trek actors can you devote an entire episode to, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Nimoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting.
In fact, Leonard Nimoy was Jewish as well, right?
Yes, they both were Jewish.
Yeah. Bill Shatner got his start, early. He would do teleplays on TV, and what was that court drama he did? It was in the South.
That movie he did?
Yeah. Your commander doesn't have his notes handy. But anyway, he had a lot of good roles that got him noticed. And when they were recasting the role for Star Trek, Gene went ahead and went for him.
It's kind of interesting because one of the things I watched was an episode of Man from U.N.C.L.E. from 1964. So this is like pre-Star Trek.
Oh, there you go.
And it featured William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy together.
Mm-hmm.
So they were actually together before Star Trek.
Yep.
And it was kind of interesting because Warner Klemperer was also in the episode. Colonel Klink. Colonel Klink and Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. But it's actually a really good episode if you watch it. But it's basically there's an Eastern European dictator that Solo and Ilya need to take down and discredit. And so they need someone whose background they could check into and would be, like a real background. So they found William Shatner, who plays the owner of an exterminator company, but he was an ex-MIT chemical engineer. So they basically made it up so that his exterminating company was a front for this spy organization and leaked the information to the dictator and his assistant, played by Leonard Nimoy. And the frivolity goes on from there. But there is a scene though where William Shatner's character is at a banquet and he's supposed to act like he's drunk and cause a stir and all that. And as Solo is escorting him out of the banquet, Leonard Nimoy comes up and starts interacting. And that's kind of like, I guess, their first scene together before Star Trek came along.
That's cool.
So, but yeah, I was like saying, I think Man from U.N.C.L.E. was on MeTV like on Sunday nights for a while. And I remember like tuning in and going, "Hey, Shatner. Oh, and Nimoy." And I had to look it up and see, is this really before Star Trek and whatever?
You got a twofer.
Well, I think a lot of these folks, that were on Star Trek were kind of floating around, doing a lot of TV. So they probably ran into each other a lot and were aware of each other. And, by the time they all wound up on Star Trek, I'm sure they were at least familiar with each other, if not, buddy. So.
Well, I don't know. I mean, a lot of them weren't buddies once the series was over. But
well, no, that's a whole other thing we can talk about. But
speaking of Mr. Shatner,
yeah. But so Shatner, obviously did a lot of early television, and I think the interesting thing to me is that his episodes of like Twilight Zone, I think, are pretty well known. You wonder, like, well, would they be as memorable to us now if it wasn't for his later, stardom? Or, if somebody else had been in the roles, would we remember them? It's hard to say, like, where it all would have gone.
Well, it's like, if Jeffrey Hunter continued as the captain, would he have been as memorable as Kirk? if Pike went on. But he also passed away early, so he never would have even made it to the movies.
No.
That's true.
I do think that Shatner really adds a lot to those episodes. So there's like Nick of Time and Nightmare at 20,000 feet. And especially Nightmare at 20,000 feet. I mean...
well, that's the one that like everybody remembers.
Yeah, of course. Because you've also got the thing on the wing, you know.
The thing on the wing.
The thing on the wing. That's how I always thought of it when I was a kid. We used to call it, it's the thing on the wing. He's just so, he's so Shatnerian. It's like the pure essence of Shatner in that episode, you know. He does all his little tricks and, with the eyes moving back and forth. And, my favorite part of that is when he tries to steal the gun from the air marshal, and he's down on his hands and knees, and he's looking back and forth feverishly and trying to, pull the gun out. And it's just he does that weird sort of obsessed, crazed thing so well. And it's funny because just last night I watched the Star Trek episode, The Enterprise Incident, where they're trying to steal the Romulan cloaking device, and Kirk has to fake going insane. And it's the same kind of mannerisms and stuff, you know, where he's kind of looking back and forth, and he's all shifty, and it's just it's so Shatner. There's no other way to describe it. You know?
I mean, there's also The Enemy Within, where he's got to play good Kirk and bad Kirk.
That's what I was going to say, the way his eyes are but that's acting, damn it.
I'm Captain Kirk.
And here we are 50 years later talking about how good of an actor. They make fun of Shatner, you know, and I don't want to poo-poo his co-stars in the original cast, but, very few have a kind word to say. And I love George, don't get me wrong. But even he was poo-pooing the fact that Shatner went into space. It's maybe they are just a little bit jealous of the man's talent. You know, how many Emmys do they have? How many albums have they recorded?
Here's the thing.
Not to draw a comparison, but...
The difference between the original Star Trek and then the shows that have mostly followed, with the exception of Discovery, because they kind of went back to the original formula. But the original show... Shatner was the star of the show, and Nimoy was his co-star, and the rest of them were supporting cast. It wasn't an ensemble show like the later shows became, like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. So they really were there to just do small bits. They weren't always in every episode. Shatner, being the star, really had to carry the weight of the show. He really felt like he had to make sure things were good on the show, and he felt like he bore a lot of responsibility for the success of the show. You know, and I understand that at times he was probably an asshole, but you know, I don't know everything that happened.
Well, to hear Harlan Ellison talk about it.
Yeah,
and Harlan Ellison is one of the biggest assholes around, but
yeah,
but he was, and I think David Gerald echoed it that Shatner would go and count how many lines he had, and then count how many lines Nimoy had, and then you'd always have to have one or two more than Nimoy.
Well, the thing with him and Nimoy came out of, you know, the amazing popularity of Spock, which a lot of people didn't, you know, see coming. So all of a sudden he's like sitting there going, wait, I'm the star of the show. What's happening? Why is this guy getting all this fan mail? Why is, you know, what's going on here? So yeah, he became kind of obsessed with that. I'm not saying, this is the thing. I can enjoy Shatner. I can admire him for all the things I like about him, especially the way he kind of grabs life by the throat and just gets everything he can out of it. But I can also acknowledge that he can be a jerk. You know, I know that, you know, things I've heard, he can be a jerk. And, you know, geez, I've seen him in person, either gotten an autograph or a picture with him now, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, whatever. And yeah, he is aloof. You know, he's not the most, like, friendliest guy. That's his thing. That's fine. I know what to expect now, you know, and that's fine. I could still admire someone even while recognizing maybe flaws or whatever. I'm not perfect. I don't expect perfection in everyone. But my God, these people still having these grudges. They're all like 80, 90 years old. And they're complaining about like, well, he cut 2 of my lines or whatever. It's like he was the star of the show. He was trying. Yeah, he had a big ego. You know what? That's Hollywood. Most everybody in the Hollywood has a big ego. So,
hey, look at Laverne and Shirley. Look at the cast of Happy Days. I'm sure there were, some infighting and some this and that and, whatever. But none of them have the gravitas of the man. So, hey, he had 3 good years on Star Trek, the original series. There's this famous story that he tells of, trying to get work after Star Trek. And, there were no real residuals at that time. I mean, going into syndication was something new. So he was basically driving around from job to job, working theater, sometimes dinner theater, living out of a trailer, a small trailer.
Yeah, he had like a camper on the back of his truck. And he was living in there, and I don't know, part of the time he had his dog with him. And
there's that story that kid sees him get out of the back of the truck, and he's like, "Oh, you're Captain Kirk." And yeah, it's my shuttle, Oh, man.
He had a lot of lean times, And,
that explains things like Kingdom of the Spiders and The Devil's Reign, which I actually really love.
I like Kingdom of the Spiders, too.
It's funny because I wanted to watch Kingdom of the Spiders leading into this episode, and the only place I found it was on Riff Tracks.
Yeah.
So I had to watch the Riff Tracks version of it.
Wait, is the king of physical media telling me he does not have a VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, and or Blu-ray, 3D, or otherwise of this movie?
I do not. I was never really into Kingdom of the Spiders all that much.
Shocking.
Whether Shatner was in it or not. One thing I will say about that movie, though, is like throughout the movie, Shatner's always like opening vents or opening doors like in the ceilings. And every time he does, like 50 spiders fall out. And he falls for it like every time. And acts surprised, like, oh, God, there's more spiders up there.
Well, you're talking to the guy that has a copy of Night of the Lepus because DeForest Kelly's in that one. So, I'd be remiss if we didn't mention Will Viharo, Will the Thrill.
Oh,
How many Thrillvilles did he have? It was an annual thing, Shat Fest. And,
in the Bay Area.
This was in the Bay Area. And, Incubus, the only movie that I know of where the entire movie was the cast spoke Esperanto.
Yeah, that was peculiar.
See, now I never saw that, but did it have subtitles? Did you have any idea what was going on?
Well, on the DVD you can get the subtitles, but I think in the movie, I think the movie had subtitles.
I think it had subtitles.
So.
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah. Speaking of Esperanto, it's like the last time I saw Forrest J. Ackerman was when he was in the Acker condo, is what we called it. He was out of the Acker mansion. He was in the Acker condo. And we went over, and, he's pretty old, so he's like sitting in a chair and not really saying much. And then suddenly some guy comes in with his cute girlfriend, and Forey was right up on his feet, and he went right up to her, and first thing he asks is, "Have you heard of Esperanto?" And then he went into this whole explanation of how it was going to be the new language, and it'll be the universal language of Earth and all this other stuff, but that's like the first place I heard of Esperanto.
Esperanto was Forey Ackerman.
Yeah. Was Forey getting all excited and telling this girl
Esperanto. It was going to be like Mandarin. Was meant to unite all the different dialects in China, and I always thought of it like that. But anyway, Esperanto. And the guys from Outer Limits actually did this movie.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And so it was. And then once again, Bill threw his heart into it. I mean, he acted his ass off, speaking Esperanto. So it's a great movie. It's on DVD. I'm not sure if it's on Blu-ray, but if you guys get a chance to watch that, I highly recommend that, as well as Impulse.
That one. Oh, my God. That one you really have to see to believe.
Exactly.
And those 70s, the clothes that he wears in that.
Wow.
At one point, he's in like a weird knit tank top kind of outfit. It's not flattering at all. And his hairpiece, it's not great.
You know, I am one of those devotees to the Shat where I do not believe there is a hairpiece. I believe that it's all Shatner and God love him.
Honey.
You know, it was funny. I saw this picture on Facebook, and I can't remember what TV show it was from, but Shatner was standing there in a blue jumpsuit, and they were saying it was a precursor to Halloween.
Huh. That's another fun fact, Chief. That mask that Michael Myers used in the original Halloween on through to 103, Halloween 103 or whatever, was a Captain Kirk mask.
Yeah. So
and
they were like looking around he had to have a mask. They were looking around for a mask at the last minute. They ended up going down to the store and buying a Don Post Captain Kirk mask, painting it white, and there it was.
There's a great series on Netflix, The Movies That Made Us, I think, or something like that. And they get into Halloween as one of those movies, and they dedicate a good 5-10 minutes to that mask because it became iconic,
Shatner was on some show, and he claimed that for Halloween, at least, I don't know if he did it repeatedly, but at least one Halloween, he said he claimed he got one of the, because now they make a Michael Myers mask that is basically that mask. He claimed he got that mask and went around the neighborhood in them masks. So his mask of himself is
one of the
weird.
One of the books that he was working on, maybe Star Trek Memories. It could have been something else, but he would wear this weird alien mask to the
and
creation
go to conventions. Yes.
In Vegas, asking people questions about Star Trek and Captain Kirk and stuff, and no one ever, caught on. So who knows what the man could have done, on Halloween or otherwise.
I think a lot of people do that. A friend of mine used to hang out with Seth Green. And Seth Green would go to cons with him, and he would just throw some mask on and walk around, and no one would know who he was.
Mm-hmm. I heard Mark Hamill did that as well. I guess it's a nice way to be anonymous.
Yeah.
And
go ahead,
I was going to say another thing that Will showed at one of his Shat Fests was White Comanche. And that's where Shatner played the twins. And one was like raised by Indians, and the other one was, I don't know, he was like a bad guy. And it was just not the best movie. But like you say, I feel like this is one of his defining characteristics, that he kind of just throws himself into whatever he does, So it could be like a terrible show, or it could be a commercial, or whatever it is he's attempting to do. He actually just throws himself into it and really gives his all, and is sincere about it.
Absolutely. I do want to say, jumping back to Impulse, Harold Sakata co-starred as well as Marcy Lafferty, and he ended up marrying Marcy. They met on that movie.
Mm-hmm.
But Oddjob from James Bond, he almost died Yeah, and if you get the DVD, they show that deleted scene. There's this car wash scene, and he
yeah.
And Shatner's over there like, there's a huge man, Harold Sakata, and he's trying to like hold him by the knees up so he doesn't asphyxiate. It's stranger than fiction, but it really happened. Shatner saved a man's life.
Jeez.
It's either, and I don't have the DVD here with me. It's either Impulse. I think it is Impulse. God, I can't think of the director's name, but the DVD came out, and again, Will tipped me off to this, and there is a Bacardi commercial. We were talking about whatever Shatner does. There was a Bacardi commercial, and they have it on that DVD because the director of Impulse directed that commercial, and it's about a 10-minute commercial, and it's Shatner basically touring the Bacardi Cathedral where they make the rum, and he starts mixing drinks for the people coming there, like, I'll have a rum and coke, and he's like, oh, okay, and they're playing this like music. It is priceless, Shatner, and it's a shame that so few people have experienced that. It's wonderful.
Well, speaking of commercials, and we're near, it's not really a commercial, it's more an info video. And since we're bumping up against Thanksgiving, I know I shared this with you guys earlier, I love that deep fried turkey video he did with State Farm about the dangers of turkey fryers.
Yeah.
Well, this is our Thanksgiving episode, so.
Right. I'll post it on my Twitter. I'll post a link to it, but the great thing about it is he made this whole video with them about how dangerous it is, the fires that get started with the deep fried turkey.
Well, first he explains how much he loves a good turkey.
I know. I want a juicier, tastier turkey.
Crispy. The skin has to be crispy.
And then he sees the turkey fryer and his eyes get all big and he's so excited about the turkey fryer and pulls the parts out and here's the fryer, the thermometer, and then he calls the little hook thing the dingle dangle. But then he gets too impetuous about it and he doesn't turn the flames off and he dumps the turkey in, the fire comes up, his sleeve catches on fire. So it's all this learning moment, don't be like I was, do this. But then somebody did a remix video of that and they use all of his little vocal parts, but they put it to music. And it's really funny. It's just hilarious. But I love his willingness to put himself out there on these things. And, as he's gotten older, he's become more willing to make a little fun of himself, be a little more,
Well, I don't think anyone can parody themselves as well as Shatner can.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Even like his albums, and I mean, he's got to know he doesn't have a whole lot of talent for singing.
Well,
but he'll still go out and do all these musical numbers and things.
Yeah. The first album, that's good, Bob. We didn't really talk about that. Was the Transformed Man.
Way back when, yes, in the 70s.
Again, if you can find it, it's probably in the cloud somewhere, but that's like, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And
it was pretty bad.
Well, I mean, I remember, and I actually watched this live on TV.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're going to say. Me too.
But, yeah, it was like a science fiction awards show.
Mm-hmm.
And he got up there and did Rocket Man.
Yep.
And I don't think it's on any of the YouTube clips, but when you watched it live, Bernie Taupin was in the audience.
Yes.
Who wrote all the lyrics for Elton John. And he wrote Rocket Man. And it's like Shatner did it and they kept cutting and showing Bernie Taupin and he looked like he was in so much pain and anguish and whatever. While Shatner was doing this thing, and it was hilarious.
If you can find that, look, basically anything you can find on the web with Shatner, whether it's Turkey or Rocket Man or whatever, you should definitely look into it.
Did you ever see the George Lucas tribute.
Yes, I just watched
where
that.
He
the
comes out
tribute.
at the beginning, and it's like they introduce him. And he comes out, and they're all kind of like looking like, "Oh, what's Shatner doing here?" And he's up there saying, Star Trek has such an influence and all this stuff. And then he like stops and he like looks around and sees all these like TIE fighters and Star Wars pictures and stuff. He like pulls a letter out of his pocket and he like starts reading it. Dear Mr. Shatner, would like you to open the show and Star Wars. And they come out and they start taking him away. He's like, wait, I can do Star Wars. And yeah, he does a whole thing, kind of a monologue about George Lucas, and then
he sings
My Way,
yeah,
with all the stormtroopers like dancing behind him, and this is hilarious. But
it's a great clip. Yeah, he's gotten so good at just making fun of himself, and it's really, to me, I enjoy seeing that because I remember for many years there, after Star Trek, the series was off the air and sort of before the movies, became successful. He seemed to be very uptight. I mean, we had the whole appearance on Saturday Night Live with the, get a life and all that. And he didn't you'd see him in interviews for things and he didn't want to talk about Star Trek. He was really, he seemed a very unhappy guy. And I remember that changing, I think, somewhere along the line after the movies started to be successful and he seemed more comfortable poking fun at himself, I'm
not certain, but I know for sure that because Nimoy writes about it, the battles that he'd had with Paramount over the Spock character, over residuals, over the use of his image on dolls and posters and bubblegum wrappers. And you can only think that, they got paid for the show and then afterwards nothing. That Shatner, I don't know that he had the same court battles as Nimoy, but I do know that after the motion picture, Shatner's contract read something to the effect that whatever Nimoy gets, I get. Because Nimoy was a shrewd negotiator.
Well, I think it was more like whatever Nimoy gets, I get $1 more, or some weird thing like that.
Something like that.
So yeah, it's like Nimoy would do all the negotiating, and then Shatner would just reap the rewards.
Well, famously, Nimoy, because they created the character of Zahn for Star Trek Phase 2. It was going to be the TV show, and then they moved Zahn. They were going to go to the motion picture. And, they threw enough money at Nimoy and settled all of the court cases that Nimoy had and brought Nimoy onto the motion picture. And then, all the rest of the films followed suit. But
Star Trek wasn't his only TV show either.
No.
We've got T.J. Hooker with James Darren from the Time Tunnel and Heather Locklear. And then there's also Barbary Coast, which I don't think too many people remember the Barbary Coast, but that was him and Doug McClure.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
he guest starred on The $6 Million Man.
Yep.
He would guest star on Match Game with Gene Rayburn and company. You name it. He still had a presence. William Shatner still had that. He was
one of the captains of the Battle of the Network Stars. One year.
I remember watching those.
Oh my God, those were bizarre.
And T.J. Hooker went like 4 or 5 years, maybe. No, I think it was 5 years. Anyway,
it actually did pretty well when it was on.
Yeah, it went longer than Star Trek.
I want to say Barbary. I'd have to look it up. I want to say Barbary Coast only lasted maybe a couple seasons, but
I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was 2 seasons.
Oh, 2. But, again, he still stayed relevant, still stayed in the public consciousness. And, with the movies, especially Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, certainly The Voyage Home. I mean, these movies had a second life for Star Trek and for these characters. Had the movies not been as successful as they were, we wouldn't have seen a United Paramount Network launching a next generation, Star Trek show and Deep Space Nine and everything else. And, I recall going to conventions, and Shatner was at a convention. Someone asked, why are they using the Next Generation's theme song in the motion picture? And Shatner was like, that's our theme song. That's not the motion picture's theme song. And, when the Next Generation first launched, there was a little friction because Star Trek IV had just come out as well. But,
yeah, I always kind of thought it was they cheated a little bit by taking the motion picture theme song. It's like, come on, think of one of your own.
Yeah, that's saving money.
Well, that Jerry Goldsmith music.
What's that, Walker?
Oh, I just said you can't beat that Jerry Goldsmith music. Right. I mean, da 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 da. I mean, it's
as I think about it, I have to watch Star Trek 3 again. But motion picture had its theme song. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan had its theme song, and then I know 4 had its robust theme song, but I can't recall what they used for 3.
3, yeah, that Star Trek 4 to me always sounds like Christmas music. It just didn't seem appropriate. Da, 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 da.
It was so uplifting to me.
I know, but it still sounds like Christmas music. I don't know. It never seemed right to me. I mean, not that it's not bad. It just didn't seem appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of music, I know we started to talk about his musical career. Granted, he does not sing so much as he is like a spoken
It's like
word
a dramatic
artist.
Recitation.
Right.
Yeah.
But I will say that Has Been album from 2004 is really, really good. I won't vouch for his other stuff. I heard some of the later works that he did, and it was kind of like, But Has Been, the thing about Has Been is that, that all the stuff on there is really heartfelt. Like you can tell, he either the stuff that he wrote or some of it that, he picked out to cover has meaning for him.
Yeah.
And it, expresses, talk about vulnerability. There's a lot of vulnerability. The thing is called Has Been. There's a lot of vulnerability in that album, and I really enjoy it. Especially the one song I liked the most was It Hasn't Happened Yet.
Right.
Where, you think about everything with him and his ups and downs, but ultimately, this was a guy who, got another career, got another shot at success and was doing well and stuff. And yet in that song, he talks about basically how he feels like he still hasn't done that thing that he needs to do. He's still like, he didn't make his parents proud, or he doesn't feel like, when he lies down at night that he's that person he should be or whatever.
He hasn't gone to space.
Well, maybe the song would be different now.
He might be cool now. How many people actually get to go into space?
I will echo Karen's feelings on Has Been. Ben Folds 5. They had a collaboration 6 months or a year, whatever time before, called Fear of Pop. And it was just Shatner being Shatner. It was great. But then, Has Been, he works with Henry Rollins.
Yeah.
They do a song together. Yeah. That's Me Trying. He talks about his daughter or daughters, and it's just so personal and bold. if you haven't heard it, again, like I said, just start Googling Shatner now, kids, and watching and listening to everything. Well, like Karen said, everything after Has Been, don't bother.
So basically, get the Has Been album. That's all you really need.
Bob, you wanted to kind of go back to Devil's Reign.
Oh yeah, I love Devil's Reign. I mean, yeah, Shatner's in there. He's not in the whole thing, but he's in a good chunk of it. But just his performance when he's going up against Ernest Borgnine, and comparing they're basically having a battle of faiths there in the church, and it's got a great cast too, because like I say, you got Shatner, you got Ernest Borgnine, Ida Lupino, and even a very young pre-stardom John Travolta is in there.
Yep.
I could have swore Eddie Albert was in that too.
Eddie Albert's in there, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was Travolta's first starring role, if I'm not mistaken. Hey, look.
It's either that or Carrie, whichever one came. Or not Carrie. Anyway, yeah, it probably is.
You get those different kinds of actors together on film. It's magic. That's one of my favorite movies. And the effects are kind of But, I don't
know. I kind of like the effects when they're melting in that. Of course, you got Ernest Borgnine turns into the ram at the end.
And one of the effects that I really liked in Sugar Hill, it's the black eyes. They utilized the black eyes in that film too.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's always been one of my favorites. I saw it in the drive-in when it came out. And
of course,
yeah, it's always stuck with me. Is not just because Shatner's in it, but that helped. But you got a collision of worlds between Star Trek and Green Acres and McHale's Navy. It's all in one big movie.
Welcome back, Kotta.
Welcome back, Kotta. Yeah. And then I think we kind of glossed over Kingdom of the Spiders, I think. But
yeah, that was classic Shatner.
Doesn't he play a veterinarian in that one?
Yeah.
It's problems with the livestock, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. Spiders.
Yeah, and I don't remember if I talked about it during the show or before the show, but yeah, in that movie, it's like he just keeps opening vents and overhead compartments and things, and every time he does, 50 spiders fall out. And he falls for it every time. He's always surprised. Oh, look at all the spiders.
It'd be interesting to know, in real life, if he had any kind of phobia around spiders. But, he needed the money, right? So
I think everybody has spiders on them in that movie.
Yeah.
Just about.
I like some of the stuff he's done later on that has been more documentary type based.
I thought you were going to say Airplane 2.
Well, he's funny in that. He learned that he could be funny, I guess. Although some people say that he's a natural comedian.
Leslie Nielsen was a fairly serious actor before he fell into Police Squad or Police Story.
Right.
Absolutely.
Naked Gun, Police Squad, and then Naked Gun movies.
I enjoyed it. I assume you guys have seen The Captains, his video that he made where he went and spoke to all the different Star Trek captains.
Yes.
I have not, but I guess I'll look it up.
That one is worth watching. It's interesting, some of the things he sort of teases out of people. Well, he had that interview show for a while where he spoke to a variety of people, not necessarily, most of them were not Star Trek people. He's had so many sort of short-lived shows. I mean, he has The Unexplained now, but he had a show on Discovery years ago that was, I think, called Weird or What. He's had a number of these kind of, real life kind of shows where he either interviewed people or looked into topics and stuff. The Captains, though, is really good. And then he Another Star Trek oriented one was.
Before you jump on the captains, one of my favorite scenes is his discussion with Avery Brooks.
Avery Brooks, yes. Oh my God.
Avery's, go ahead.
Well, no, like you're about to say, like Avery is just sort of like out there playing the piano, not answering any question directly.
He's kind of like a version of Shatner, He's kind of like marching to the beat of his own drum, and Shatner kind of feels, I got the impression, kind of felt out of his element, and Avery's like, okay, come on. You want to ask me a question? I'm going to do it to music. And he's playing the piano. And, okay, now say it, Bill. Say it. He's like, I feel uncomfortable. I'm interviewing Avery, and it's about Star Trek, or whatever. Oh my God, that was just hilarious.
That was priceless. That's worth watching the thing alone, is just to see him interacting with Avery Brooks. Yeah. And that was the point at which everybody goes, "What is going on with Avery Brooks?" But
you were going to say, Walker. I didn't mean to.
No, it's a very entertaining piece of film, and he also talks to Leonard Nimoy, and their relationship. It's very sad to me that he wasn't able to resolve his issues with Nimoy before Nimoy's passing.
I think if you have a chance to watch Mind Meld.
Yeah, many years ago I watched it.
Yeah, it is they had a lot of love and respect for one another. And look, families, you get into arguments, and you try not to leave the house with the crossword, because you never know if you're going to come back, to say you're sorry. And unfortunately, he didn't have that opportunity, and he and Lenny, they were like brothers, and they had a misunderstanding and an argument, and whatever. And in any case, Mind Meld, you can really see the love. There's some videos of conventions where, they were going around and they'd really feed off of each other, and they enjoyed each other. You really got that impression. There's a story that Nimoy was saying that, Bill Shatner, he's not here, but that son of a bitch, we were at a convention, and he brought everyone in the, auditorium into the garage. I'm sitting in the car waiting for him so we can, go to the airport, and scare the crap out of Nimoy with like hundreds of people crowding into the garage.
We saw them again at another Pasadena show.
Right.
The two of them were together on stage, and they were really fantastic together. But the funniest thing about that one was it was the first time Carrie Fisher had come to a show. And in the middle of their little routine, as they were talking to each other, she comes on stage, and they're both surprised. And she walks right past Shatner and walks up to Nimoy and gives him a big kiss.
Yeah.
And Shatner's like, what? So that was hilarious.
And look,
they had a classic feud between each other for a long time. I mean, it's kind of all tongue in cheek, but yeah, there were all these videos with Carrie Fisher and William Shatner just like, dissing each other, and dissing Star Trek or dissing Star Wars or whatever, and they're really funny if you can find them. But yeah.
Oh yeah. There's some videos of Shatner and Nimoy at Dragon Con, and those, Nimoy was asked to go to the Beyond the J.J. Abrams version of Star Trek, and Shatner wasn't, and he's giving Shatner a hard time, and it's really fun. If you guys, viewers, have a chance to check that out. But I will say, and Walker, you can chime in, and Bob, over the years, not just Shatner, but, there was a time where Nichelle would not sign a certain photo because her neck was like tilted a certain way.
I got a hard look from her one year from a picture I brought up.
There were times when Shatner, like, don't talk to Shatner, just let him sign your, thing. And it felt like you were like in a soup kitchen or something, there was an assembly line, and I guess it got back to him, and he was explaining, look, I had a plane to catch or something, and it was a bunch of bullshit. He was just being an asshole, but he was in a hurry and he wanted to sign as many autographs as he could, and so maybe in doing that he came off a little cold and whatever. But I'll say in the later years, getting autographs and pictures with Shatner. Matter of fact, Jasmine and I, when he did the Wrath of Khan tour,
I did that too.
Yeah, it was down in South Bay, and we went down to Cupertino and we watched the film. And I will say, Jasmine is not a Star Trek fan, but God love her, there she was with me. And all the beats in the Wrath of Khan where you needed to laugh or jump or gasp, she did. And I was just like, it's so great that it still works, with someone who's not even familiar with, the Space Seed, But he comes out afterwards, and there's a guy there to ask him questions, and he's talking about his love of Dobermans and horses. And, at the time Trump was president, and they asked him, what do you think? And he's like, well, I've been around long enough not to poo-poo anyone, because you never know, is he going to get a second term? Is he going to run for Congress or whatever? He says, but, he's been around the McCarthy hearings, and, things have a way of writing themselves. And it was like this wonderful time with him. And then afterwards we got a photograph with him, and look, I'm not saying anything bad about the other actors. We got photographs of Stan Lee, and the poor man, he was just barely smiling. And then Jazz and I got pictures with Adam West, and he'd sit there with his eyes closed and his head down, and then be smile, and he'd look up and smile, and then his head would go back down. Very weird feeling to get pictures with your heroes, your icons. Shatner was so engaging. Hello, did you like the show? Thank you for coming.
Wow, you got more than I did.
Oh, it was just great.
Well, yeah, Silicon Valley Comic Con, where, I went there and I got pictures with Burt Ward and Adam West. And, I walked up there, and they're, of course, like, don't talk to the stars, and just, go up, take a picture, get off. And I walked up there, and it's like they're both sitting there. And I go, I bet everybody stands next to Adam. I'll stand over here next to Bert. Just blank stares. Didn't it? I
sad.
thought, God, maybe that broke the ice a little bit, but no. So then, next was Shatner. Same kind of thing, except he just say hello, and, we got done. He said thank you, and, off I went. But that's kind of like the last time I will ever do any kind of thing like that. But, he at least acknowledged that someone was present in the room, which many do not. But
wow, we had a good time. Not as good a time. The best conversation I had with a star was Nimoy. We were in Vegas, Karen, and I sat there, and he's like, you having a good day? I'm like, yeah. I says, I'm so happy. This is better than sitting down with Santa Claus. And Nimoy started laughing. That and Ricardo Montalban. Those are my favorite times getting autographs. But anyway, I digress. The conventions were fun. They were exciting. Sometimes they were sad. I remember Jimmy Doohan was on his last leg, and he was just rambling up there, and it was like, oh man.
Well, I mean, I went to, I think it was a Space Con in Oakland, and Bob Wilkins from the local Creature Features, he was the host. And Shatner was there, and Nimoy, Doohan, George Takei, Arlene Martell, and Bruce Hyde. They were all there.
T'Pring.
And I can't remember.
Riley?
I think Nichelle Nichols might have been there as well. But
was this in the 70s?
Yeah, this was before
it got
Star Trek The Motion
commercial? Picture.
It was like, all there was, I guess there's probably the cartoon, but I mean, all there was the original Star Trek. That's it. And so that was back when the Trek conventions were pure.
Yeah.
It's like, this is all there is, And they were all talking about the upcoming Paramount UPN series that was going to bring them all back together, which later became the movie, whatever. But yeah, there was no Star Trek motion picture or any of that. But
I give him credit. We kind of talked about his stint on Saturday Night Live, but that was pretty bold to make fun of the fans of the way that he did. And I remember him saying, we're taking a chance on this. We're just having fun. And then he gets into the convention, and they're asking him all these questions. He's like, well, I did this 30 years ago. I don't remember, what I was thinking or, was the prime directive. And they keep on pushing him, and he loses it. He's like, well, grow up, move out of your parents', basement. Have you kissed a woman yet? He's like, and then Phil Hartman runs up there and starts reading him the riot. I can't hear what he's saying. He's like, oh, sorry, that was the evil version of Captain Kirk. This is the good version. And everyone's like, oh, yay. I have to say something about Galaxy Quest, because even though it didn't star the original cast, wow, what a lens into their, kind of dynamic, and just a little bit. I mean, it's not autobiographical or autobiographic in any stretch of the imagination, but a nice little homage to the franchise and that original cast.
I will say, though, that he talks the talk and he walks the walk, because although he's been an actor and he's been a Star Trek actor, he's done all these other shows, but he has all these other things in his life that he pursues as well, because he has all this stuff he does with horses that he, he rides horses and shows horses, and he does all this charity work with the horses and stuff. So that's a big part of his life. And then he's always interested in learning about stuff. So he gets involved with these shows that are either like documentaries or like the pseudoscience stuff, like The Unexplained, where he's always trying to, he wants to know more. He went on, what is it? It's not Ancient Aliens. Is that what it's Ancient Aliens, right? The one with Jordan, the guy with the hair, right? So, and they had this episode where he was sitting at this table with all the usual suspects there, and he would ask them questions like, well, why do you, what about such and such? And they would come up with these theories, and he would kind of sit there and eye them, and then he'd ask other questions. And it was just oh my God, he's just sitting there really grilling them on this stuff. And of course it was, he's getting paid for it. But I think he has this insatiable, curiosity about life, and he does science shows and these other shows. But of course,
he raises Dobermans, doesn't he?
He has his dogs too, so that's another aspect of things he likes to do. When he was younger, he used to do motorcycle racing. He used to enjoy doing the motorcycles, but I think he's the bow and arrow. Yes, there's a famous shot of him with the bow and arrow on a motorcycle. But then we can't not talk in this episode about, it blows my mind how he actually went into outer space. He's the oldest person on the planet to go into outer space. So he went into outer space.
Well, he was 90 years old when he did that.
Yeah, he was 90 years old with Bezos' Blue Origin back in October of last year. And it obviously had a profound effect on him. When he came down, he talked about how, seeing the blue earths and the blackness of space, and the blackness felt like death to him, and then realizing this little small thing was the only thing that had life, and how precious it was. And I guess his new book, which I think Larry will get to shortly, it's all about how we need to, he's got a new frame of thinking. And I think this has happened, if you look at what happened with a lot of the astronauts when they left Earth and they saw Earth, as a single, this ball floating in the darkness, they had the same kind of thing happen to them. Their frame of reference totally shifted, and they had an awareness that came to them oh, we're all just on this little thing together. We need to start working together and start recognizing that we all, belong together.
But it never happens.
I know. Well, we need to get more people in space. I don't know. Maybe we can get everybody in space.
And, bring them back down and change their perspective.
But I thought that was really interesting that, he goes from being an actor who plays a starship captain who's always in space to being a man who really went into space. Like, how many actors play an Olympic athlete and then go and perform in the Olympics? That doesn't happen, right?
Well, I mean, like Roddenberry and some of the other actors, didn't they have like their ashes spread and shot up into space or something?
Well, I don't think they were aware of it.
Well, that's the closest any of them got until Shatner went up.
Oh, I don't think Scotty knows where he is now.
Well, he'd know where he was when he was here for a while.
Well, unfortunately. After he hit his head on the bulkhead.
Chief. I watched there was a documentary on Amazon, of course. And beforehand, Shatner was like, I'm not going to fart around and float in zero G. I really want to experience what it is to look out the window.
Yeah.
And feel what it's like to not be with that blanket of life, Mother Earth.
And just make sure there's no gremlins out there, right?
Well, and then Jeff Bezos is a huge Star Trek fan. He made these little, communicators or whatever when he was a kid and gives them to Shatner to take up into space. And Shatner's like, sure, no problem.
He's like, God, another geek. I can't get away from these Star Trek geeks.
Him and Obama and God knows who else.
Truly an amazing person. Look, I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention The Practice, TV show The Practice, and Boston Legal. He won two.
He won an Emmy for each one, right?
Emmy. They were both for Boston Legal.
Oh, okay. I thought there was one per series.
Yeah. Yeah, but those were great shows. And hold on, I'm sorry. The cat's here.
Well, I mean, one thing I wanted to bring up, which Debbie and I watched the other night, and it had nothing to do with space or sci-fi or anything else. It was a movie called Senior Moment. I don't know if you guys heard of it. Shatner did that in 2021, I believe, like last year.
Oh.
And he plays this old guy who doesn't believe he's old, so he's like, he's got a sports car and he's hanging around all these young women and he's like going out to bars and everything else. And he goes to this old folks home every day and he picks up his buddy who's played by Christopher Lloyd and they go cruising and everything. And so they're cruising in his car and they come up to a stoplight and this lowrider pulls up next to him. And so they're jabbering back and forth. And so Shatner finally challenges the lowrider to a race. Like, okay, the guy's like, all right. And so the light turns green. Shatner takes off. And the lowrider just sits there. And of course, there's a cop right around the corner waiting.
Oh, God.
So he goes to court. He loses his license. He can't drive anymore. So suddenly, age is hitting him. It's like they took his car. They impounded he had like a Porsche and they impounded it. And so he's got to ride the bus and walk. And he ends up meeting this woman, this artist on the bus. And they have a relationship and things. But it's actually a really funny movie. And it's I generally don't watch anything that doesn't have monsters or kung fu or rocket ships or robots or something. But I watched this one and it was good. It was funny. I actually enjoyed it. So if you can look it up, I think I watched it on Amazon Prime, but it's it was a Senior Moment.
In Boston Legal, the series goes for a number of years, but it ends with Denny dealing with whether it's Alzheimer's or senility or a combination of the two. And Denny says, no, it's not Alzheimer's. I have mad cow. it's Mad Cow, and they're trying to, and it's a very sweet ending. I don't want to give it away, but it's just an amazing series. So funny. Shatner is just so sharp in his delivery of lines, and James Spader is wonderful. There's a point where Denny has a flip phone, and his phone rings, and he whips out the flip phone, and it makes the sound of a communicator, and Shatner just kind of gives the audience a look like,
yeah,
oh yeah.
Well, I mean, even like in the movie, he's great at just making fun of his age. Yeah, and at one point it's like, he's gets into this woman's room and they're about to have sex, so he like turns away and like pops a pill, and then he starts choking on the pill, and so she's got to get him water, and he's got to drink the water, and he's like still choking, and finally he's okay, all right. Then she's like, "What color was the pill you took?" He goes, "I didn't take a pill." And he stops for a second and goes, "Oh, blue." But
they had another scene where there's a lawsuit about these fish, and it's a certain kind of fish anyway. They refer to the fish that are farmed as Klingons, and Shatner's in the way, he says, "Did you say Klingons?" And it's like, oh man, if you're a Trekkie, you got it, and if you weren't, that's okay.
I think everybody knows who Klingons are, but for the most part.
Well, nice little insight. But Miss Congeniality, he does a great job, as a comedic actor in 1 and 2. What else?
We would be remiss if we didn't mention the PlayStation commercial.
Oh, I just watched that tonight.
Him and the Gorn sitting on the couch, and they're playing each other, and then of course they get mad and they stand up and they like reenact the fight from the arena.
Slow motion.
Then at the end, he's just
Gorn.
like, they're both like out of breath, and he's like, "Oh, I'm too old for this." But,
I like how the Gorn picks up a sofa cushion like a boulder, holds it over his head.
Oh, and what about the Priceline commercials?
Oh, for years, Priceline was the big thing about Shatner.
And when he'd sing, like songs of the modern, modern songs, and just, it was only like a couple of seconds, but still.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Priceline, and then he kind of segued, because he was part owner, I think, of Priceline when he did this.
He made a lot of money.
At the right time, that's right.
And then he kind of segued over to Kaylee Cuoco, who played Penny on Big Bang Theory. I think she took over the commercials after that. But there were a couple where they were in them together, and it was pretty funny.
You guys get a chance, and the listeners, see Shatner while he's still around if he's doing conventions. Most certainly he'll do the Vegas TrekCon. There was a time when he was telling a story up in Sacramento about taking his family on safari, and these elephants making noise and taking a huge poop in front of his tent. And Kate Mulgrew was like, is he really telling this story to these people? I feel like I have to apologize. Famously, he talked about the gorilla that could sign, Coco, the gorilla.
I was just going to mention that. Yeah.
And go ahead, Walker. What's the Coco story?
Well, the Coco story, because again, he was intrigued by this gorilla that could communicate through sign language. So he wanted to meet Coco, and they let him in the room with Coco. And then I guess almost immediately as he, got close to Coco, Coco grabbed him by the balls.
Well, they prepped him by saying, this is how you sign I love you, Coco. and she reads lips too, so you have to say, I love you, Coco. And sign.
I love you, Coco.
And here's Shatner's voice. So I prepped myself, and I was very excited. And Coco is a big gorilla. And Coco, I love you, Coco. And I was emoting, I love you, Coco. And Coco reaches out her hand, and I'm ready to embrace, and she grabs my balls.
And then he was like, I love you, Coco. I love you, Coco. I love you, Coco.
Goodness.
He told another story one time where he was at an amusement park with two of his daughters.
Oh, yes.
And it was like I guess there were some guys that kept hitting on him or teasing him or something. And so he thought, well, I'm Captain Kirk. I'm going to go take care of these guys. And he goes over to confront them, and they kick his ass, and he realized he's really not Captain Kirk.
I think in the version I heard, he tried the flying drop kick, and it didn't work very well.
Yeah, the one I heard, he didn't give any details of the fight, but just
there was another story. Nimoy was saying they got invited over to Shatner's house for dinner, and they ended up getting food poisoning and had to drive them all to get their stomachs pumped.
Oh my God, I hadn't heard that one. That's a good one.
Man, yeah.
Well, he's certainly lived a full life, and hopefully many more years. Yeah.
And then some. I know. Anytime I see Shatner trending on Twitter, I'm like, oh.
I know. What?
Yeah.
Well, George Takei is in really good shape for his age. I mean, he'll go up and do like one-handed push-ups on Letterman one time and stuff. But I still think Shatner is going to be last man standing.
Yeah,
amongst
have
the
that
original
feeling.
Trek crew.
Well, have you seen the picture? They have that. I really want to go there. Is that set recreation at Ticonderoga?
Oh,
they have all the Star Trek sets. I really, really want to go there. And Shatner goes there sometimes, and you can meet him and take pictures on the bridge and stuff. But they had Shatner, Takei, and Walter Koenig all there, and they all sat in their original crew positions and took pictures there. And now it's so, I don't know, kind of poignant because they're it. That's all that's left is the three of them.
Was George flipping him off behind his back or anything? Or
I'm sure they compensated Mr. Takei generously to be a gentleman that day.
But I think you're right, Bob.
There's an interview with Walter Koenig a couple of years ago. It's the AcademyAward.com or something like that. And Walter's kind of come to terms with Shatner and what was, and I'm a 70-year-old man now. And he's kind of accepted it and moved on, and this is my life now, and I was like, good for you, Walter.
He seems like because he's even said Bill was the star and he had to deal with a lot of stuff the rest of us didn't, and it's like, okay, it sounds like he's come to terms, like you said.
But he still holds a grudge against that damn cartoon, right?
Well, he did get pretty screwed over at the cartoon.
Yeah, Walter wasn't too happy with that. It was, as Shatner would say, sabotage. Mr. Shatner, we'd like you to say sabotage. I say sabotage.
It sickens me.
Well, my friends, this was a lively discussion about how thankful we are for William Shatner, James Tiberius Kirk, Denny Crane, et al. Any last-minute comments, thoughts, stories to share?
I think I'm all shatted out, but
shat your last shat.
Did we shat ourselves collectively tonight?
It is that time of the show where we have our censor suite, and the latest and greatest things that have come across our collective desks are shared with you, our listeners. This episode's thing that I'll be sharing, your commander's sharing with you for the censor suite, is Boldly Go, William Shatner with Joshua Brandon, Reflections on a Life of Awe and Wonder. This is a modest 238-page tome, and unfortunately, yours truly has only gotten into about 50 pages.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, he talks about Noreen's passing, obviously Star Trek and some anecdotal stories here and there. He's a wonderful, wonderful storyteller. And yes, he did get help from Joshua, but that's okay. We all need a little help from our friends now and again.
Yes.
This was found on Amazon, of course, because I think all of Shatner's stuff is going to be on Amazon if it's not already there. Look, just real quickly, the Shatnerica book is wonderful if you can get a hold of that. William Shatner's personal account of the making of Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. I know. It's a good little book, too. But yes, Boldly Go is fun. I'm enjoying it. I'm going to read it some more tonight. Highly recommend it.
I'm hoping Santa has that for me this year.
Well, let me just say, yeah, do not purchase. We're in that do not buy zone.
The do not buy zone. Oh, my.
Pretty sure Santa's going to send a little something your way.
I'm getting a new roof put on my house, so I'm not buying nothing for anybody.
That's okay.
But hey, well, before we go though, I'd like to just acknowledge three people, count them, three that recently passed away. And that would be Kozuki Omori, who basically directed Godzilla vs. Biollante and Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, and also the voice of Batman, Kevin Conroy, passed away. And the little cockroach LeBeau from Hogan's Heroes. In fact, Robert Clary, who played LeBeau on Hogan's Heroes, he was like the last remaining cast member. Just passed away at 96. Although there's the guy who played Baker, who took Kinchlow's place in the last season, maybe for like 20 episodes or something. I think he's still alive. Kevin Williams or something. But
the original cast.
As the original cast of Hogan's Heroes, LeBeau, Robert Clary, was the last of the last.
May they rest in peace.
Ah, yes.
Well, my friends, this was a lively discussion. I am truly in love with William Shatner and everything that he's done. Whether it was a strong performance, a mediocre performance, or The Transcending Man. Was that the title?
Transformed Man.
Transformed Man. And then that gets back to the whole, the Has-Been song. At least he tried. It's one thing to succeed and fail. It's another thing not to try at all. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Karen and I always remind ourselves of is risk.
Risk is our business. And that's the thing. Life is all about getting out there and at least trying, at least making something, trying to make something happen.
Absolutely. Hey, you know what else we're thankful for? You listeners. We appreciate you tuning in time and time again. Special shout out to Steven. You're always liking the YouTube posts. Appreciate you very much. Hey,
Podbean.
Share the good word. What's that, Walker?
I've got to let everybody know we've made the big move over to Podbean.
That's exactly right.
So it's basically, we will direct the planet8podcast.com over to Podbean soon. But the original was a Blogspot.
The Blogspot, will
be around, but
yeah, there's no reason to take it
archive
down. Yeah, it'll exist as an archive, but we have all the original episodes also on Podbean now, and we also have a presence on a lot of other podcast apps like Spotify and Google and other stuff. So people should be able to find
podcasts
us.
But
our home base moving forward will be Podbean.
Yes, and you can still hit the planet8podcast.com URL. It'll take you over to the Podbean site, and look, we're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So share the social medias. Make sure you head over to...
We haven't done TikTok yet. Or what's the other one? OnlyFans
Maybe we can
or TikTok or Reddit or God.
Maybe we can get. Do we? Any of us know like a 13-year-old that could put our stuff on TikTok?
Possibly.
Hey, if you guys can share the YouTube, the more subscribers we get, we can start doing some live video stuff over on YouTube. So that's one of the things we're looking forward to do next year. But hey, please continue sharing everything else. Enjoy the podcast. We appreciate you guys. Stay safe. This draws this episode to a conclusion. Wishing you all a happy Thanksgiving. Peace out.
On that note, this will conclude this transmission from Planet 8. We would like to thank all of our intergalactic audience for listening. Be sure to head on over to our website at www.planet8podcast.com, where you can get more information on this episode's topic.
For more conversation, find us on Twitter at Planet8Cast.
Or on Facebook at facebook.com/Planet8Podcast.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in each and every episode. We look forward to your input and opinions. Until next time, this is Planet 8 signing off. End transmission.
By George, he's got it. It is the end.
Get a life, will you, people? Crying out loud, it's just a TV show.